morning, traders, and a very happy Monday out there to you all. Hope that y'all had a nice weekend there, and should be a rather interesting week in front of us here. We got some nice items there to be aware of this week. However, for today's purposes, to kick off the week here, we're nice and light, no major 8:30 data points here for our Monday morning. The only item we'll want to be aware of on the board for today, as far as the U.S. Side of things go, we do have a 10-year bond auction that will be due out later on in the day at 1 o'clock Eastern. And as we'll see, bonds, fixed income have been having some interesting movements there as of last week, so that'll be noteworthy. And then outside of that, that's really the only main item there on the board for today. And then outside of that, also over here on the TradeStation board, I'm just going to drop in the link here for the CME volume there on the ES there. Just seems as if the volume has shifted into the March series there for 24. So we have the ESH up here on the TradeStation charts just for now, since the volume has slowly shifted into that series there. But with that said, we'll keep that in mind there. The roll and everything. The currencies take a little longer to roll, so we'll be on guard for those as well, noting when that volume starts to shift from that December series out to the March. But with that said, without any further ado, we want to come over here and start to jump into these charts here for the S&Ps. We know we had a good extension there last week, and we were able to close ourselves outside of our range, which was at least nice to see. The top par basis this March series was up here at 46.57.75. So we were also, able to close outside of that. So we closed on Friday up there at 46.60. Even with Friday's high being 46.66, which we did end up trading through in the overnight session. So we've put in a higher high, which is perfectly fine. So keeping ourselves pretty maintained up here as far as the ES goes. Looking on to the far left, of course, not quite front month at the time. We know as to where we're starting to trade back up towards, but for now we can at least give them credit for making it above their previous day's high. So we'll have that 66.50 from the Globex high to, bear in mind. 5 SMA down below comes in at 46.37. But this day today will be fairly crucial because we were able to get outside the range, so we'll really want to see if they're able to, prove it there today, if they're able to maintain and hold themselves, with all that progress that we had made on Friday's trading. So that's where we are in this March ES. What I also want to point out, I think this is also pretty noteworthy. This is over here on the SPY, right? So the pit session equivalent, or the ETF, if you would, for the ES. Note as to where we traded up to here on the SPY, right? So this is also a very nice and visible swing high that we were able to trade above there during last week's trading. 459.44. This was the high from our summer months here in the SPY, so not too shabby on closing above that. However, this is also the pit session display, so this is only going to be the day session hours. So taking that into account, we'll also be interested to see where the SPY goes to open on the day with respect to this previous nice visible swing high. Or if you want to go out to the weekly basis, you can certainly get the same kind of feeling there, coming up and trading at and around previous weekly swing highs. So as far as the SPY goes, it just kind of helps normalize things a little bit better, since we weren't quite front month at the time back then. But what we'll want to see, once again, is where we'll be set to open with respect to these previous swing highs. So that's where we're standing there in the SPY. A pretty good march up, or the ES there, both having, some good progress there at the tail end of last week. So we'll get that one scaled back over here and let that one run its course there. We can also come over here and take a look at the DAX. DAX really continuing with its same nature, right? We had the range expansion to the upside on Friday, out of the inside range bar. So good continuation as far as the DAX goes. They were also able to trade above their previous day's high. So we have our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 green bars up, or 8 closes above the 5 SMA. So DAX sporting that extended run, feeling back to the upside there. Not really many additional data points up above there as far as the DAX goes. More so would be concerned with the feeling that we still have this good, persistency of trend taking place in the DAX. So for now, we just have a pause bar of red, but certainly still maintaining 16,695 down below. Would be that daily 5 SMA in case we were to really loosen up at all. That would be a spot of interest since we haven't even really tested beneath that point here in quite a number of days. So DAX still the stud, if you would, there. Continuing to maintain its bid there. So not a whole lot to fault there on the behalf of the DAX. And then we'll also just take a quick look here, since we don't have any morning data points, at that of the NASDAQ future. So here with the NAS, let's sky up just a little bit. For comparison, it did have some, good trading there last week as well. Some good low to high activity. However, not quite enough to take out the visible swing high on the daily bars for the Nasdaq that comes in at 16,410. Whereas our S&Ps, on the other hand, have been able to, trade fairly well on the other side of that point. So if I bring these side by side here on the March series, and zoom this out just a notch here. See, we were able to make the higher high, which we, for the most part, already know, but we made the higher high there in the ES, whereas the NASDAQ, not quite getting up there in the same manner, so that's still going to loom out there at 16,410 there, so that's with our NASDAQ, and then we get to move on along to the currency spectrum here with the EC. We know on Friday, we put in our red bar back down on the dailies after having, just a set of consecutive red bars down, a pause bar of green on Thursday, and then we proceeded to get pretty decent range expansion down on Friday. Also good to note is that we're back beneath, right? When we were putting in all this work, we had a good extension, a nice cycle high, if you would, and then taking that out upon the second time, we really started to get some better extension or expansion. So still viewing this 1.0, 77.45. Previous cycle high as being a zone of interest for the EC. We have been trading through it. We've been kind of closing right around that vicinity here over the past, 2 to 3 trading days. So what we also have is kind of the opposite side of feeling of the DAX, right? We have our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 below in the case of the euro currency, where we have 8 closes above in the case of the DAX. But with that said, here in the euro currency, we do have the tail from Friday, which was a little bit of a ways down there. We know we came out, did our testing down first. That's below at 1.07270. So the tail area in the EC does loom below, but we're trading right inside kind of where we had settled there on Friday's trading. And if we bring out our 240-minute display, we know that we're kind of building this out. It's more of gave us a little bit of that kind of wedge feeling, right? Our converging trend lines that could start to be drawn. And we had our one up move, right? Our pause bar of green on the dailies. So what we have been doing, it's a bit on the heavy side, but filling ourselves out that kind of A, B, C type of wave here in that of the euro currency. And if we look over to the left-hand side, we're filling in a lot more work from the original impulse bar that we had to the upside. So this was the testing done on Friday. We did leave a bit of a tail, so I'd say, we did a pretty decent job of, coming back to the point of interest we were trading before our takeoff point. So, I'm filling in a couple of the blanks there with the EC, but this low that we put in, 1.07270, is going to be pretty substantial there. So we can come down and we'll see if they want to try and come back and put in any type of higher low. Else, if they take out that 1.07270, wouldn't be a very constructive look there for that of the EC. So I'm going to have some work carved out for itself there, but we'll keep an eye, at least at minimum. It's done a better job of filling in some of the structural work here from our original takeoff point, right? So filled in a couple more of the blanks, and should be one worth keeping tabs on there, or keeping an eye on, is that of the euro currency. And then we have the gold next in the queue here. The gold also fairly decent rhythm that we have been having going on. Of course, we know we had the shift in the upside momentum, of course, on the previous Sunday, our wide range reversal feeling. And then very interesting on, we had formed our balancing act after having that little shift in momentum, right? So we formed some short-term balance, our 3-bar balance mode. Friday, though, pretty steady range expansion to the downside that we had in the case of the gold. So we had the Friday low marked off at 2010. 0.6. So we definitely were able to trade on the other side of that fairly quickly, but we are leaving a bit of a tail. So for one, that previous day's low or Friday's low is going to be a nice level to keep on the sheets. So that's 2010.6 there for the gold. We've already gotten the trade below that point, so we've already kind of fulfilled that portion of the equation. So we already ate the tail, and now if we blow this up a little, we could see. I mean, even though we had some good progress to the downside, we still have plenty of additional data points and tests that we had done in the past, even on the daily bar. But when we come down to our intra-day, whether you're looking at the 240 minute or the 120 minute display, blow this up just a bit here. When we come down, we'll be monitoring here, right? So it was a good impulse, and we've been doing the kind of grinder mode alongside this lower Kellner channel on the 120 minute display. So for now, we haven't really seen that nice symmetrical feeling on the oscillator to give us that nice M or W shape, to give us that nice feeling of major loss of momentum, similar kind of to what we had before. Remember, this was on the 120 minute when we were coming fresh to the downside, our little shortening in the lengths of the swing. So we had a little bi-divergence feeling from before. Really lent itself to more just sideways action before the next shoe started to drop. But point being, looking at the oscillator this time around, all we have is that one impulse for the momentum low. It hasn't quite formed that symmetrical higher low in the oscillator as of yet. So GC still might have some workout cut out for itself. If we blow this up nice and big, or we can just go down to a 30-minute data. We'll see, some of the decent selling pressure that we had from Friday in the early morning session. So even if the gold does have some counter-reactive lift, we would still be trading inside of that high to low bar there from Friday's trading. So as far as the gold goes, we'll be keeping an eye. We'll see about the oscillator configuration. You can see it kind of gives us a little feeling there on the hourly charts, but hasn't quite fully ripened up as of yet. So just being aware of that, as the day progresses on, to perhaps check up periodically on that hourly and 120-minute basis there in the gold, just to see if any further loss of momentum starts to ripen there in the GC. And we have our crude. Crude also a mover last week, as we as we well know, right? So crude was another one that had formed its balancing act on Friday. Nice counter-reactive move though. Nice additional green bar back up. Not quite enough to get back on the other side though of the 72.37, which was a fairly substantial low that we had breached from. So here in the crude, it's interesting because we closed just barely on basically the 5 SMA there on Friday, but it's in the backdrop of a 3-bar balance mode. So keeping it contained, 72.37 is going to be a level worth noting in case we do try and come up and do any type of testing towards that zone. But outside of that, we're also in the backdrop here of having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 red bars down. We put in 2 green bars up here on the daily chart. So just keeping an open mind here, just because we do have our 2-period rate of change, flipping back down. So far we have a doji bar, and just being respectful once again the fact that we did come in as a 3-bar balance mode, so we can get some better range expansion going. It's just a matter of keeping it fairly tame coming into the day there in the crude. On the hourly charts, it's going to give the same feeling. Here's a 72.37, so we're walking back some of the damage that we had from the selling pressure last week. In a fairly slow but surely process. No major higher lows forming on the hourly chart yet. This hourly test that we had last week still put in a lower low, so we've been working up and filling in some of this action that we had to the downside there from last week. If I just took a little square and marked off this zone, and then if we look over to the far right, we've been just kind of slowly inching and building ourselves out some more progress inside of that zone for the crude. And then last but not least here are the bonds. And we're just taking a little extra time since we didn't have any morning data points here, so it gives us some time to get to a little more dialed in, if you would. And lastly here we have the bonds, right? And interestingly, you have the 10-year auction today to be aware of. So as far as the bonds go, nice March that they had. Nice range expansion as well on Friday's trading, right? We had left ourselves a bit of a tail, and we're proceeding to come back down and trade into that. So for one, the previous day's low. So 118.14 in the bonds. But Friday we did have the morning data point, so we know that we spent a good portion of Friday's trading doing work inside. If I were just to scroll this back just a notch here, we have been doing most of our work inside of that 830 835 data point. So that was for the basically the full duration of Friday. And then in the reopening overnight, we did proceed to do some testing, but find this to be just interesting or noteworthy. The fact that we came down and traded almost to the tick there, the bottom of the news bar from Friday, 118.14, and I believe we traded down to 118. 14, yeah, so almost like a double bottom there in the case of the bonds. But either way you slice it, basically, as we come down there, for one, that's obviously a good point of interest there for us. And then any further down from there, we'd be, starting to loosen up a little bit further. We do have previous zones of interest there, so this 118.14 is going to be kind of the early morning point of interest there as far as the bonds go. And then also, I always like to take a look at the yields as well, right? Just to give us a slightly different feel for things. So as far as where we stand in the yields, going inverse against the bonds, of course. So we do have some gaps. They're not huge or super well defined, but should we push any further in the bonds to the downside, the yields have a little open spot here at 4.383%, but that would require the bonds to push down a little further, which they haven't quite done as of yet. So more so, we're just kind of rotating here, 4.35% there in the case of the 30-year yields, and this is how they look on the daily display. So pretty good persistency of trend as well. A little balancing act there last week with the pop back above the 5 SMA. You can see we're just opening at the upper end of Friday's range there in the yields, or the lower end of the bond futures if keeping eyes on those. So inside the tail, but didn't really blow through the tail. All we did is do a perfect retest of the low of our 830 data point bar there from Friday. So with that said, we'll get these charts back up in order here for us. This ES right here in the middle, and just kind of see as to what we have lining up here in the early morning session for us. We'll keep the SPY up there on the top right. Obviously, it's not going to do anything for us right now since it's not open, but going into that pit session opening, we'll be kind of interested to see where we'll be opening in the SPY with respect to its previous visible swing high there. So with that, dial it back, let some things settle on in here, and we'll hop right back on should there be something nice and interesting starting to line on up for us. But should be a nice Monday here to kick off the week for us, and then we'll have Damon on in about just another 25 minutes here with his market profile and perspective for the day. And in this environment, should be some nice items to take into account there on that market profile. So we'll look forward to seeing that as well shortly. And just going to dial things back a little here in the meantime.